Okay, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Special Community Development Committee uh, meeting to order. Can we get an invocation from my friend Councilman McBride? Are you good for a on-the-spot Zoom invocation?
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
It's Lord God, please give us wisdom and insight and help us to just glorify you in our decisions and our deliberation and be edifying to one another. And whatever we decide, please let it be the best for the city of Charleston. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, thank you, Councilmember McBride. And as is the tradition in the Community Development Committee, we will now have our public participation portion of the meeting. Let's go ahead and give everyone a minute and a half today. And I think everyone here is familiar with the rules of decorum. Let's all kind of keep it between the lines and look forward to hearing from everyone. And how many folks do we have signed up today?
We only have two people signed up online in advance. Anthony Bryant and Sarah Spangler.
Okay, great. Happy to hear from y'all.
Anthony G. Bryant, President, AG Bryant Group, Inc., old business. Bobby Joe Neal the coroner gave me a call on January 12th, 2026. I have a lawsuit against Dominion Corporation, which has a franchise fee here. Jim Parker was a dear friend of mine, Post and Courier. He wrote a lot of stories about me back in the day, 1990s, 2000. At 9 o'clock on Friday, I get a call. And I went online that morning and found my dear friend Jim Parker was missing with Alzheimer's, vulnerable adult. My mother's a vulnerable adult as well. And I got a call at 9 Friday. Went on then Saturday morning, and I posted on Mount Pleasant's a notice. DSS and SLED deals with vulnerable adults. And the notice was horrible in terms of Mount Pleasant Police Department. Jim's like a regular person. He was a superstar. And he's found dead, my friend, my brother. And when you get them kind of phone calls, like them 1930s phone calls, a black man downtown Charleston, I don't know what goes on real estate. He did feature stories, but he did something on gentrification, a lot of real good stories for the Post, a great journalist. We hope there's something said about Jim, his family, at a council meeting, of his work and what he did in community development and what he wrote about me, young brother off Cortland Avenue, coming back home from Morgan State University, playing a little football in college to make a difference. So I never get personal in business. What I do in business, to let people know, is I'm a business person first. I don't do stereotypes. We need to have the monies in this department for defense for poor people in the city. So he's getting poorer and poorer. We need to get resources in place to demand that we have people with money come up with some money with folks with no money. And if you can do that for me, I'd be very happy. But many of black men have hung off a tree for nothing. Have a nice day.
Hi, my name is Sarah Spangler. I'm the president of the West Side Neighborhood Association. Mayor, Councilman, thank you for hearing me out today. I wrote a very long comment, so I made you a simple one-pager that kind of outlines in reading the districting for MU3 workforce housing, and reading through all of the documentation, there were just three key areas that I was interested in. One was the in lieu of clauses for workforce housing, and just learning a little bit more about if there will be a floor on that, as well as a little bit more about the build first wasn't really written into there, and I've just heard that kind of catchphrase a lot. The parking exemption for one spot for every 2 units in the rentals and 1 per 1 for the homeowners. I put a little bit of details there. I'm really excited for the park and ride, but I think it'll take a little bit for sociological norms to change in the area for people to start using public transit more. So just some ideas on maybe, since we have such tall buildings, we could implement some parking garages as well as the vegetation section, which was really beautifully laid out. But this area has a dearth of trees, so there really isn't a replacement need. It's more of an installation need. And then finally, just a couple things I didn't see in Article 2 that were drafted, just the road elevation, more about pedestrian safety, and a little bit on flood mitigation that will rest on the developer. But thank you for hearing me out. I appreciate all the work you guys are doing. Thank you.
All right, is that it for public comment?
Those are the only two people that signed up to speak, and we also had the four comments that were submitted in advance that was circulated to the committee before the start of the meeting.
Got it. Got it. Is there anybody else here that would like to give a few public comments?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Jones. I'm here on behalf of the Historic Charleston Foundation to express our support for the MU3 Workforce Housing District. We believe this district is an important step forward for Charleston. Increasing the required share of affordable units from 20% to 50% is a meaningful shift, and tying stronger affordability requirements to areas where the city offers additional flexibility helps ensure that future growth benefits the workforce. We're especially encouraged by the requirement that affordable homes serve a range of income levels, creating a healthier mix of moderate and lower income households. And the perpetual affordability provision is also critical, ensuring these homes remain affordable in the long term rather than reverting back to market rate. Finally, we support the requirement that developers build on-site units rather than paying a fee or donating land. Pardon. Charleston needs real livable housing, and this ensures approved projects deliver tangible results. The MU3 Workforce Housing District is a strong tool for providing high-quality, permanently affordable housing that respects the character of historic Charleston, and we look forward to partnering with the city to move this forward. Thank you.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice. All right. We will move on to approval of the December 11th, 2025 special meeting minutes. Can I entertain a motion?
Approval.
Can I get a second? All right, moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. First item up under old business are a few city-led property acquisition updates, one for 899 Morrison Drive and the other for 993 and 995 Morrison Drive. I assume, Mayor, you're going to take us through these?
So we are under contract to purchase 899 Morrison Drive. This is the longshoreman property that includes the parking along UG Street. And our due diligence period is ongoing, but we look like we are targeted to move towards closing. One of the things, just update there, no real surprises there. No real surprises there in terms of what we're finding. Looks like the closing date is still scheduled for March 30th. Our inspection period is the end of this week. And in terms of, there are 2 leases that come with the property that convey that are 6, like the lease on the building was with the ILA. It equates to I think about $30,000 a month. Combined, we have $30,000 a month coming in income on that property, on those 2 properties. That's for parking, and that is for the building there. And so, again, y'all will recall that this is one of the key locations for the Build First program that we would do in partnership with the Housing Authority, which we'll hear a lot more about here momentarily. So this process is ongoing. Looks like everything's clean to close again as scheduled. 993, 995 Morrison. This is something that a bit of a new effort or opportunity, I think, for the county and the city to work together. You all will remember that we had this under contract. We had different appraised values from the county. And bottom line is their appraisal came back at approximately $34 million with the assumption of MUWH3 zoning being put in place on the property. That was higher than our appraised value, so we ended up moving on and deciding to move forward with 899. Now, One of the concerns, and again, opportunities that I see here is the county intends to sell this and they want it to be in some form or fashion committed to workforce housing. So what we have proposed to them is to remove the tech overlay, which we've actually had first reading on. And if they agree to have it rezoned to the MUWH 3, which we're talking about today, that we would be that they could then end up going to the private sector and selling it, right? But it would be committed for public housing, or at least a portion of 50% of it. The concern that I have about this, and I'm going to go talk to them tonight at their finance committee, and I've talked to several of their members, is that if they go out to market trying to sell this property, 6.5 acres, and their proposal is that the developer buy it for, let's just say their appraised value at 34 million. Our solicitation, for which we'll talk about here in a minute, with the housing authority would be, in my opinion, my previous professional opinion, would be much more attractive in that we're coming to the private sector saying we have a much larger project and opportunity for you with the housing authority. And while we certainly want the developers to put money in up front, and we'll be requiring that, to come in and just have a 6.5 acre piece and have to write a $34 million check is not going to be as attractive to the market. And so we're going to be out soliciting to similar developers, capital structures, but they're going to be very different deals. And I don't want to be in competition with the county. So what I'm proposing is not a direct joint venture where they put their land in, but we co-market it together. And what I would propose here is that we look for a developer that would pay the $34 million to the county, and that the developer would then put that property into our joint venture that we would have with the housing authority. So it would combine everything just like we were talking about doing. I know this is a little bit of moving parts, but I think it would be much cleaner. It would be a great collaboration with the county. Everybody would be getting what they want. And it would be, again, much cleaner to the market. So that's what I'm going to propose to them. It is up for them to consider. And then the next step on that, if they're open to it, that we would present them with an MOU with basically those terms. Again, they're not conveying property to us. They still own it. We are just agreeing to co-market it. And the design would be included in our design efforts with the housing authority. There would potentially be risk of some of our design cost as it relates to the county's property not being reimbursed. But I think it's a small price to pay to kind of clean this thing up and make it a more unified effort moving forward versus the county doing one thing and we're doing something right next to it that's a different deal. Any questions on that? I know that was kind of a lot to take in.
I've got a couple, thanks. Sure. So just in the structure of the partnership, you've got land that is currently owned by the county. We control the zoning, which we're going to work through, right?
Mm-hmm.
We find someone out there that's willing to pay the full boat, $34 million, goes into the private sector. What is the role of, once it closes, what role would then the housing authority have in all this if it's in the private sector already zoned up with the MU3 requirements attached to it?
So the county and the city will be LP limited partners in the deal and have a very real financial interest in it. So we'll get to the proposed deal with the housing authority, but in essence, all the dollars that we're putting in, including the soft costs, including the design charrette, including the due diligence costs that we're incurring right now, would be part of our equity contribution to the deal, as well as our appraised value of our properties, right? Same thing with the housing authority. Their property would be appraised at the full market value, and that would be their equity contribution coming in. So everybody's, open book market value going into the deal. And then the private sector comes in, and we want to make sure that they have real skin in the game. And we can talk a little bit about how that might look on the different solicitations, the different groupings of properties. But bottom line is we want them to bring real capital in, to write a check. Oftentimes, and particularly in affordable housing and public-private partnerships, very little capital comes from the developer up front. I mean, they might do some pursuit costs, they might do some design and legal, but in terms of real cash in, usually it's nominal. And so in this scenario, what we're talking about, we want to attract, and this is going to require significant capital resources, institutional capital to come in. These are big projects. And we have been talking to a lot of them, and the interest is very high. In essence, these groups would be setting up their own funds for this investment, if that makes sense. And so that's why when we talk about the private sector coming in and writing a $34 million check to come into the deal and bring in the county's property, the county would then be out of it completely. They would get their money, but they would know that 993 is going to be affordable housing and part of this much larger effort that we're doing with the housing authority. And there would be the private sector coming in with a significant check. And I think that's really important. Does that answer your question?
You kind of. So then we couple that with the property to the north. Who owns the dirt?
The dirt will be owned by a partnership, right? If you think about, and we can get really into the weeds here, but if you think about how West Edge is set up, West Edge is set up where it's basically there's a first right for the West Edge Foundation to take these properties down. But right now, we still own fee simple on our properties, and MUSCF owns fee simple on their properties. But we have a combined partnership, if you will, that triggers when the private sector comes in. So again, I get this is complicated. We have done this before, and we have done it very successfully. And we're kind of using that as a mirror with how to construct this with the housing authority. So when it's all said and done, the housing authority and the city have their basis or their capital is fairly valued at fair market value. And that's not just dirt, but that again is the dollars that we're spending. That's our contribution into the deal. And we would have economics based on those metrics, right? Those percentages. And then in terms of whose role is what, we would basically, the goal is for us to get the properties entitled and ready to go, to eliminate as much risk to the developer coming in, because they're going to price it based on their risk, right? Time is money. And one of the biggest problems with affordable housing across the country is it takes so long to get through that, they end up oftentimes being more expensive than market rate. And so if we can eliminate that time, that's going to be cost savings, which we're going to need every penny we can get in order to make the economics work on this. So, and then just moving on with regards to the housing authority, there will be very specific roles and needs from the housing authority, who has done a really good job, or whose expertise over the past 30, 40 years has been in asset management, property management, managing the units. They, have all the compliance with HUD, et cetera. And that would still be their primary role on the affordable units moving forward. Does that make sense? So this is just, and we can get it, we've covered some of what the next slides are, but I did want to just talk about, this was an opportunity that I want to present to the county this afternoon to see what their take on it is, so that we can again work together with 993, 995, rather than it be going off on its own, and us in essence competing with them for finding a private sector partner. Right. Okay. So West Edge, another thing that's happening that we're going to be talking about, I guess is up for approval in this meeting, I believe, is the West Edge Foundation, which is part of this overall partnership as well. The idea here is that, and I've talked at length with MUSC and MUSC Foundation, and we're in partnership with MUSC Foundation, just for clarity. And for those of you that need a refresher, the West Edge Foundation was set up about 25 years ago. And it was a partnership originally with South Carolina Research, what is it? SCRA, a third, the MUSC Foundation a third, and the city a third. About 15 years ago or such, when Nikki Haley was governor, the state decided to get out, and the city ended up buying SCRA's membership. So we're now approximately 65%, give or take. I'm looking over there at Amy and Matt Froelich. And the MUSC Foundation's 35%. This, as we've talked about in the past, has changed a lot. There was originally, the intent here was to do medical research, biotech, and it be kind of like a campus, right? And that's kind of how it's zoned now. It's in a PUD, it has its own has a TIF tied to it. But for a variety of reasons, it hasn't developed as fast as originally intended. And during that time period, Roper St. Francis decided to move largely off the peninsula. MUSC, looking at where they wanted to have their research facilities and lab facilities, said, okay, we want to really backfill Roper's campus so that we keep it on Calhoun Street and it's together. So it really changed the dynamic and plans for West Edge. And but what MUSC desperately needs, as do most businesses, is housing for their technicians, housing for their nurses, housing for their students, housing for their doctors. I mean, like, they have an extreme shortage, and they are a huge contributor to the number of people that commute on and off of this peninsula on a daily basis. Right?
40,000 a day.
That's right. Knew somebody was going to fill me in there.
40,000 a month.
So, and that's just on Carter.
Right.
Right. So anyway, we have been in conversations with MUSC about how this is a changing landscape, and with the Bloomberg report, how the need for more housing was needed. And so we proposed that we shift more towards housing on this site and think of it differently than what had originally been contemplated. And West Edge Foundation has talked extensively about this over the past 18 months and has approved a new plan to go forward with more housing. And so with that shift, MUSC has approached us and said, look, it makes sense for us to be out of this deal, and you all can take this over. And so would you be interested in buying us out? And so where we are right now is the property's been appraised, and their collective interest in the capital on hand plus the land is about, well, it's 35 million is what the appraised value came in, but what we're looking at is a $25 million cash purchase from them, and the balance of the value would come from a first right of offer on the housing, because they desperately want and need housing next to their campus. And so that's an agreement that we've tentatively come up with that they want to take to their board. The way we would fund the 25 million is there's $10 million in cash in the account right now for West Edge. That would be given to MUSC, and the balance of 15 million would be a slow note to be paid back on or before the 31st in March of 2031. And that would be at a high interest rate. So we are motivated to get this um, uh, um, into a new partnership. So let me talk about what that would mean. So again, we want the private sector to come in here, right? This would be different than what would be happening on 993, 995. That's on the east side. And we're going to come to this. I probably should have put the packaging of the 3 different solicitations, but we're going to come to that here in a second. But bottom line is when we have a private sector partner come in on the west side, which would include all of West Edge and Gadsden Green in the partnership with the Housing Authority, they would write a $15 million check as their equity contribution. So it would eliminate that debt. Does that make sense? So that's what we're proposing in an LOI to MUSCF for them to take to their board. We would take to our council for a vote, and ultimately West Edge Foundation has to agree to it too, but they have said that they tentatively support this opportunity. And West Edge Foundation too, as it's currently contemplated, would remain with a slight difference in that some of the board seats that are MUSCF would go either at large or become city. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There we go.
So,
Should have covered this second, but here we go.
it's okay. I mean, this all looks like it's going to go pretty quickly if it goes according to plan. If we get the foundation's note or whatever it is by the 31st of March, where's that $10 million come from, by the way?
It was through proceeds from the sale of properties from the development that has been done to date on West Edge.
So from that point forward, March 31st, until we identify, get an MOU with, and get a capital contribution from this third-party developer, looks to me like we, the city, are going to be on the hook for quarterly payments of $895,368.
Right.
At a 7% burn rate, which is pretty high. How are we going to do that? Where's that money going to come from? I don't think we have it budgeted for this year. So.
No, we don't, but there is money coming in from the TIF that can go towards affordable housing. And it's not a ton, but there is some proceeds coming in, right? And then I think the goal here is to have this thing out to the market and targeted for closing by the end of the year.
So 3 payments maybe.
Maybe, yeah. And we could even, one of the things we've talked to MUSC about is actually
Putting on the back end.
Yeah, carrying that. I mean, we could those could be accruing is the idea. So again, we're not looking to put ourselves in a cash pinch. They're not looking to put us in a cash pinch. We're honestly just looking to somewhat simplify this so that we can make it more complicated.
Good job. So far, so good. Doing excellent.
But guys, look, the reality of this is in order to do a project like this, it's going to be involved. And while it sounds very complicated, and it is, these sort of things are done all the time in the private sector. This is not unusual at all to have structures like this. And it's not something that I think we can or should be afraid of given the urgency of the need. I mean, building 200 units here and 200 units there is not going to solve our affordability problem. It is just not. We need to do something that gives us economies of scale and makes a real difference and attracts institutional capital that will bring in cheaper money than what normal deals are able to, the interest that normal deals are able to generate.
And is the idea to put this at MU3 as well?
All of it would be MU3. That is why, in essence, so our property, the foundation's property, the housing authority, everything would be MUWH3. So I probably should have done this first, but the idea for Project 3500, and this is 2,500 of the 3,500 net new affordable units, would be on the peninsula, basically on our properties and the housing authority properties. And it would be in 3 different solicitations. And you might get one developer that could have 1 or 2 of them. You could get 3 different developers. I would say you wouldn't want one developer for all 3, though. So these were how we've packaged them up. This could shift a little bit. The housing authority obviously is going to have a real say on this, but this is how we've broken it down. And here are the areas, generally speaking. And there's a lot of science behind this, and it's not just where the housing authority properties are, but it's where zoning is good. It's tied to the bus rapid transit that you can see there in blue. It's tied to where the job centers are. It links to the low line. I mean, all of these things connect and are relevant to one another, right? So how it would break down, we've talked about this, but solicitation 1 would be West Edge Foundation in conjunction that we would be the main partner in with the housing authority, putting Gadsden Green and the approximately 15 acres at West Edge into the deal, and then bringing in a private developer to write a $15 million check at minimum to come in as our partner, right? That's solicitation 1. Solicitation 2 would be the Central Peninsula, which would include our property on Mount Pleasant Street, which is where, the head of the low line, as well as half of 995 Morrison Drive, assuming the county comes in. But also include from the housing authority, Ragboro Homes and Meeting Street Manor Extension. Okay. And then the third one would be Cooper River Courts, all of Meeting Street Manor, not just part of it, as well as 993 Morrison Drive, the other half of it. So those could maybe be broken up slightly differently, but these would be the 3 different packages that would go out. Any questions on this?
Sure. Can you go back to package 2 just for a second?
Yep.
I'm just trying to figure out that Mount Pleasant Street. There's a couple parcels there, right?
Yeah, so we've actually taken the liberty of including some of the other privately owned parcels there, just in terms from a planning standpoint. They are not part of this. That is for that's why these are in watercolors.
Got it.
And Josh, just for clarity, the 899 would be part of package 3. Yeah. So, I'm sorry. I got it. So again, this Meeting Street Manor that has half of 993 would also have the Longshoreman property as part of it. We just need to update this slide. But I mean, again, all total for these, because it's 50% of them would be market rate. Well, let me back up and say, all total, this could be approximately 7,000 to 8,000 units, total units. 50% of them would be market rate, and this is over a 7-year period that would be developed. So roughly 1,000 units a year. 50% of them would be permanently deed restricted for affordable housing. 25% total would be making sure what's currently being the need of the current use of the housing authority properties would be replaced. Does that make sense?
Mr. Mayor, you said 50% of which first number, the 7,000 number?
Yeah, let me back it up. So right now, the housing authority property is at 20 units to an acre. We're going to go to 80 units to an acre. Okay. And so 20 units would remain exactly what the housing authority has now, right? Per acre. Another 20, getting us to 40 total, would be workforce housing, or somewhere between 60 and 120% AMI, as reflected in our MUWH zoning classification. So that's 40. And then the balance 40 would be market rate
Correct.
per acre. And depending on whether or not the county comes in, they would be, that would take it between, let's say it's 7,000 without the county, it would be probably closer to 8,000 with the county. And as you can see, we've done schematic plans on this. We've modeled these out, and you're going to see more about this. Is this in the later in the slide deck, the concepts? All right, let me get to that really quick. Give me a second. We'll come back to that, and we'll come back to this. Well, never mind. So we have a design group coming in with some of the leading architects in the world, frankly, on classical architecture, that have agreed to come in and help design these concepts for these 3 different parcels. Because again, we would be designing it, entitling it, and handing it to the developer saying, this is what we want built. And the community will be very involved in that design scale mass. But we have done enough breakdowns. We know we can get 80 units to an acre and meet the parking requirements that are outlined in the MUWH zoning, and do it in a way that would be much more in keeping with the built environment of historic Charleston, right? Not the big wrap, ugly apartment buildings, but broken up, smaller units. And the way we can do that is because we get economies of scale. We're talking about designing about 6 or 7 different prototype structures that we've met with manufacturers on how those things can be built using concrete, steel. So these are not cheap building materials. It's not that there's anything wrong with container ship, modular stuff, but this is more, think of like design concepts that are repeated, much like what you see all over Charleston in a Charleston single house, which is nothing but a rectangle, right? A simple structure. So we're taking those concepts and repeating them out, getting economies of scale with manufacturers, and figuring out how to design something with this incredible design team to flush out how we can make this look like it blends in with our historic urban fabric. So that'll happen. That is scheduled now for the week of March 16th. This will be something we want the community to come and be part of. We obviously want council members. We want advocacy groups to be part of, neighborhood associations, builders, etc. And we're going to get really into the science of this. And the 2 leading architects are Hugh Petter and Ben Pentry, who we met with when we were on the trip to England this past summer and looked at Poundsbury and other examples of how they've seamlessly incorporated what they call social housing in with market rate housing all across England and other places as well, for that matter. So that is the gist of it. And we are also, again, guys, we've been talking with MUSC. We've been talking, I'm going to talk to the county about this. This is obviously some updates for community development for city council. We're taking this for approval to West Edge. And we've presented a proposed breakdown or framework for the partnership with the Housing Authority, which they're taking up in the next 30 to 45 days as well. They've engaged legal, we've engaged legal. So I know this sounds like a lot. It is moving a lot of different interests and parties together into what we all agree is a common goal for affordable housing, and done in a way that is of this place. And it is taking a lot. It is a big effort, but I'm really excited by it. I think it has incredible potential. And I think we would be irresponsible if we didn't pursue it and pursue it aggressively. So, again, a lot to take in, guys, but happy to answer questions.
Any comments or questions from members of the committee?
What do you suppose, I mean, this is complete conjecture, but what do you suppose a 50-50 split, 7,000 unit plan looks like in terms of an absorption rate? How long we look at it in the future before you think that's
Again,
built out and leased out?
if you look at the need that Bloomberg has done, and I suspect ULI will back this up, I suspect the home builders will back this up, I suspect the Chamber of Commerce analysis will show this up, we have a supply problem. We do not have a demand problem. People are moving here, increasing numbers, and that is driving our costs higher and higher and higher. So we need to figure out where we want development to occur to release that pressure that is forcing people to move farther and farther out. And the best location, at least from my perspective, and is the definition of smart growth, is to do it within existing infrastructure with ties to job centers, with ties to transit, and that are currently underutilized. Example, housing authority. And example, some of the properties that the city owns, where we're parking lawnmowers. This is where we've already generally zoned it for much higher density. In fact, with West Edge, what we're proposing here is much lower density than what it's zoned for, what the PUD allows for. So this is much more of a neighborhood than a corporate or institutional type campus for biotech research. It'd be an extension of the West Side. So that's, I think absorption will not be a problem is the answer. Especially if we're not charging $4 a square foot for apartments.
Councilmember McBride has his hands up.
Councilmember McBride.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, can you go back to the slide with the money part of that?
Oh, sorry. This is, I jumped over this, not intentional. Wait. This is how the TIF, this is how we propose to pay for this, right? So I cannot read that, but bottom line is we've done an original breakdown on the Cooper River Bridge TIF, which is almost $70 million in either current funds or anticipated funds for that TIF. So we were originally talking $30 million would go towards the purchase of 993. We don't need that much anymore because we're buying 899. So we can use the balance of that 30 million, approximately 12 million, to actually go into full construction drawings and starting on vertical. And again, this would be part of our contribution into the partnership. I've also put in there, we've spent the $3 million for the UG Street gap funding. We've got the $15 million that's gone towards the low line, Morrison Drive landscaping. But neighborhood planning is where we intend to pay for that charrette and those folks coming. That aggregate cost is about $150,000. So we're a little under budget there, and the 200 that's been allocated. Martin Park renovations are still there. We've increased that a little bit because we need to increase that scope. So that's $5 million. So bottom line is with all of this, as well as the Cooper River drainage project, Cooper Jackson drainage project, we still have about a $7+ million balance after acquiring all of this and putting those additional proceeds that would get all of this design done. So this is how we're proposing to break, the new budget, if you will, for the Cooper River Bridge TIF. And the reason why we could stretch some of it to West Edge, because it's not part of because it's affordable housing. And that's the one category that can move. It doesn't have to be within the district itself.
So to summarize that in kind of layman's terms is it's mostly, it's a lot of TIF money.
It's all
That's
TIF
going,
money.
yeah, all TIF money. So for the average constituent that doesn't know what a TIF is, it's taxes that are already paid that towards this area anyway.
That's right.
And I think it's a good concept, and not skeptical of this concept at all. I'm just overall just a little bit skeptical of there is a demand right now, but again, it's the whole idea of chasing demand in the future. We don't know what the demand's going to be 10 years from now, but I get it. I mean, I know we need this now. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that for the average constituent that doesn't know that this isn't new money that's going to be taxed. It's already been collected. It's already a system in place that's supposed to go towards this district anyway. So I just wanted to highlight
That's right.
that.
Yeah. This didn't comment off of West Ashley or Daniel Island or anywhere else. It is coming directly from the tax increment additions that come into a particular area and has been accruing in this district. And frankly, just so happens to be where a lot of the housing authority property is, where our property is, and where public transit is. And so it makes sense to use this funding as our source of capital for making this a reality. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm not in trouble.
Okay.
Sorry. Mr. Mayor, does this chart include the usage of TIF for the West Edge proposal that was discussed?
Just for the design component, a portion of that design.
Can we go back to that slide, please?
The West Edge?
Yeah. Just make sure I understand where we are here.
Yeah.
It had a piece of property highlighted, actually.
Yeah.
It's a little
So
bit further back.
yeah, that.
So, because just to make sure I know which piece of property we're talking about, it looks like
Wait, you talking about
this
that
one. Yeah. So that's the piece of property that's essentially now the parking lot that's across the street from the Publix. And is it that kind
That's
of orange
across-
highlighted?
That's across New Market Creek, actually.
Okay. So that's the,
Well, I guess it would be part of that, actually. You're right.
yeah. So that's the Marriott that's a little
Yep.
above it, right?
Yeah.
So
But for clarity, just so, not to get too far into the weeds, but as I mentioned earlier, that property is held fee simple title by MUSCF. The ones in yellow are held by the city of Charleston. They collectively have an option for West Edge Foundation. But for all intents and purposes, I would assume the red and the yellow are owned by West Edge Foundation. They have control over the parcels. That's just the way West Edge is structured. Same thing that we're talking about in concept with some variations with the county.
so this arrangement covers both the
Red and yellow.
red and yellow.
Yes.
And only an element of the payment structure is reflected in the slide pertaining to the usage of the Cooper River TIF.
In terms of the acquisition?
Yeah, well, I'm just
No,
trying to.
the acquisition for West Edge between the city of Charleston, and there's an umbrella of West Edge, right? So there are two members of West Edge, MUSCF and the city. We are buying out MUSCF. We're proposing to buy them out, right? With cash on hand that West Edge has, plus a note that wouldn't be paid for by the Cooper River Bridge TIF. The only thing that when West Edge that we've paid for by the Cooper River Bridge TIF is some of the design drawing.
I understand. So I'm trying to locate the source of the
15 million?
of the, let's say in 2026, and I wasn't involved with this fiscal year, but as Councilmember Seekings pointed out, looks like, there'll be about $1.8 million, maybe 500K in interest in 2026 to carry that note, right? And I'm trying to source where those funds would be coming from. That's why I was asking if it was coming. You referenced the TIF when Councilmember Seekings
Yeah,
asked
there's
the
a
question.
different TIF here. This has
Okay.
its own.
And
TIF.
there's not a slide to that effect?
No, I
Okay,
mean,
gotcha.
we can get the balance of what
Sure.
proceeds are available in that TIF.
Sure.
But again, if there's a cash issue, we'll work with MUSCF on deferring that until the private sector comes in and takes it out.
I was just trying to get the right TIF. Thank you.
Gotcha.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? I've got a few comments. First off, thank you, Mayor, for going through this presentation, and thank you to our staff for, there's an enormous amount of work that goes into putting something like this together. And, you know, I do a lot of work around the state. I'm pretty in the loop with what's going on, and nobody in South Carolina is talking about doing anything remotely like this. In fact, most local governments you run into around South Carolina are either actively antagonistic towards affordable housing and workforce housing, or completely out of the game, just not even talking about doing anything. So City of Charleston is leading in this in a very aggressive way, which I think is appropriate given the scale and magnitude of the challenges that we're facing. I just wanted to highlight a couple things that kind of came to my mind while we were going through this presentation. The mayor's absolutely right that there's a lot of precedent for these types of deals in the private sector, joint ventures, things of that nature. My only comment would be, since we are a governmental entity and we're dealing with a lot of other governmental entities in this process, I always kind of cringe a little bit when we're having to pay money to other governmental entities to advance affordable housing and workforce housing initiatives that all of these governmental entities purport to share an interest in. This is not a situation where we're trying to make a profit, or that's the part of this that's disanalogous to the private sector comparison. So, I mean, you know, as far as the West Edge piece goes, you know, we've got the $10 million in the West Edge account. That's fine. I don't really understand why we have to do a note to MUSC. I mean, if you know, it seems to me that we can joint venture that. MUSC can, you know, waive their option or do something else that just doesn't put us on that kind of financial hook. I just don't understand what the purpose of that is. We're all trying to do this together to serve mutual goals. I mean, that would just be my comment on that as we have these discussions and negotiations. And then the other thing I'll say is, and it's not to be, I don't think this should go unnoticed. The idea that a private developer could bring capital into an affordable and workforce housing project and development at scale with pre-permitted, pre-engineered, pre-approved plans is such an enormous game changer in this world. And there's so much financial value in that, because so often, as is the case in these types of deals, you know, affordable housing development can get millions of dollars into a deal and then run into permitting and legal challenges, you know, in the seventh inning that completely derails the project. And there's so much risk around affordable housing, often due, frankly, to political interference in these projects. And all you got to do is Google it, and you'll find the examples in South Carolina. It happens. And so when you take that out of the equation, and rather than the government being an obstacle, but the government is a partner and a champion behind what we're trying to do here, it completely switches the dynamics on its head and hopefully creates this incredible incentive and opportunity for private capital to be deployed along these initiatives. So I'm a big fan of this. I think this is bold thinking. There are a lot of details to hammer out, a lot of different moving parts, no question about it, but at least we're trying. And I think that that's something to be celebrated, and thank the mayor for coming up with this idea and for the staff for working it forward. And it really has the potential to be a game changer, both here in the region and hopefully the entire state as well. So very excited about this and look forward to hearing and learning more about it. And hopefully MUSC will maybe cut us a break on that note, but we'll see. We'll let the mayor do the closing on that. Thank y'all. Any other questions on old business before we move on?
Oh, can I ask one question about this business?
Sure. Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thanks. Mr. Mayor, you have done amazing work in the private sector. You are one of the good developers out there, and I love what I'm seeing out of what you're proposing for the design. Are there assurances that once these designs are created, that whoever ends up acquiring these properties, that they'll follow through with these designs? That's it. Thank you.
It's a great point, and I think the answer there is yes, because we are going to be a significant, with the Housing Authority, a significant partner in the deal and have say. They just can't come in and say, you know what, I want to paint it a different color, I want it to all be uniform or what have you. But back to Councilman Appel's point, I mean, if it's set up through our design process, through our public, robust and necessary public vetting, for them to want to change it would be probably not very smart. And again, the Councilman Appel makes a point on just the risk factor in this. This is why this has become so attractive to major capital players that usually do not touch affordable housing. That's because they don't want the risk, they don't want the complexity, and if you solve that for them, they can bring capital in that will be far more cost effective than what normally comes into projects like this. So I feel like we have a lot of levers to pull to ensure that the design we're talking about is going to be what ultimately is constructed. And I do want to just reiterate the fact that that design itself is going to go through a very public process. We want the community engaged in this, but I will put this one caveat on there. We need to design it in a way that can be somewhat commoditized. I go back to the Charleston single house. We need to keep structures simple because that can bring economies of scale in production and manufacturing of these materials. And this is a large enough effort to where you can get the manufacturers interested in that, right? Creating the jig, if you will, for a particular product type. So if you want to change that, it could really upset the apple cart. And when we're looking at the design, we need to be thinking about in terms of what makes historic Charleston beautiful, right? And it's pretty simple structures, honestly. Anyway, I'll stop pontificating on that.
Any further comments or questions under old business? All right. Okay, so under new business, our first item is, we see it again, Project 3500. This is, or has this already been? Yeah, that's already been covered. Yeah.
That I do want to just mention and reiterate the timeline for when we have the design team coming in. We would like, what is this? I've lost this. We would like to get, council to review the proposed budget, even for information purposes, for where we are on the TIF for Cooper River Bridge, so that we're all kind of aligned on that. I mean, there's some other components in there that it's Councilman Polke's district. I mean, some smaller things that are very relevant, but also like Martin Park. We want to make sure that we have those funds allocated and are moving forward on those, not just having this money sit in the account. So I'd like to bring that up at council if it's okay with this committee.
Absolutely. Well, actually, while we're still on the TIF question, and I think this goes back to a question Councilmember Seekings asked earlier, in terms of who will ultimately own these parcels, that's going to be very relevant for property tax and for the TIF itself. Normally with affordable housing, you want to have public ownership to avoid property taxes and just help the capital stack and make the economics work. But I wonder if in a situation like this, given the magnitude of the development and the potential for that, or at least some of that to come on the tax rolls, that could then juice the TIF even more. I don't know how much longer the TIF has a runway, but what's the current thinking on on that?
It'd be probably a combination of both. Again, this is something we need to work through with the housing authority and ultimately with the private sector partner. RAD program typically comes in where it's a ground lease, so there is no tax revenue, and that helps with the financials, right, in terms of the operating costs, because there are no taxes, property taxes. But we also want to make sure, and it's really important, that not all of these projects or units would be rental. I mean, you want to have opportunities for ownership and people to build equity, and you want to have people that own the property that live there to help make sure that it's a neighborhood and a community that is taken care of. So what that breakdown is and where will be in part flushed out with this design charrette, which will be built environment, but also street grids, sidewalks, improvements, things like that. And that'll help define a lot more about those details.
All right, so I think it's time now to move on to item 2 under new business. This is DRB review of capital projects. And I see Robert is coming to the microphone. Take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just real quick, wanted to do our regular update to the Community Development Committee with regard to some code amendments that we're working on. I think the mayor's team is going to go in much greater detail on the MU workforce housing that we've been working on. But one of the other bills that we're working on, and this will come to council for a first reading on next Tuesday, is an amendment to our DRB review scope authority. And it's going to just add a new provision recognizing that capital projects go through an extensive vetting process long before we ever get to the design review process in terms of work getting on the capital improvement plan, and all of that process comes through arguably the public process of those budget hearings and everything else. And in working with our team, because we know these projects, they've got to get off the ground quick. We have, I think, one of the most impressive and unprecedented periods of capital investment going on right now in the city of Charleston. And one of the things we do not want to be an impediment to that, given the fact that they have had prior review periods, is the design review process. So we're proposing to add an amendment that would provide for an alternative review for capital projects that have been identified in the capital improvements plan that the city is a part of. And so this could include projects where the city is the initiator and the lead, but it also could include projects where we partnered with the county, we partnered with the town of Johns Island, or it's feasible that we could partner with St. Andrews at some point in the future. And so if we're a partner with a capital project, that would also be in this. And so these projects would work with the board prior to formalizing the design so that the board could provide input on how that design moves forward. They would only have the single conceptual review conducted at the board. And then any subsequent reviews after that initial conceptual review would be done at the staff level. Now, important to note, because again, you've heard it from the mayor multiple times, we want to make sure that design review is a part of the public process. That conceptual review is completely a public meeting. Any member of the public can attend that. In addition, we publish all of our administrative reviews as well. So once an administrative review has been completed, that is published for the DRB. And so if anyone has questions or concerns about a DRB review, they do have the ability to ask those questions. And again, I don't foresee this happening particularly with our capital projects, but they could also always appeal that administrative decision should they really be in objection to an approval. So we think that this creates a really good balance between trying to expedite these projects that are already, again, vetted through the system, through the budget process and through city council, while also still providing that transparency and accessibility to the design element with the community where these are going to be located. So with that, happy to answer any questions. On paper, it's a relatively simple amendment. We would have this coming to council for first read on Tuesday. A presentation very similar to this would be held at Planning Commission on Wednesday of next week. And then City Council will hold a public hearing on this item and potentially vote to enact it during your March planning public hearings, which I believe would be March 24th. So that would be the timeline that we'd be looking at.
Well,
We would give this pending ordinance doctrine, so provided it did get first read on Tuesday, we would start to treat capital projects as if this ordinance had been enacted.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilmember Seekings.
seeing as this is here, we've now heard about it. We are also members of City Council. Do you want an endorsement from this committee going forward to council saying we support this?
That would be great.
I
No
move-
action is required, but yes, an endorsement by the committee on this request would be tremendous.
I would
going
move,
forward.
Mr. Chairman, that we send forward an endorsement of this proposal.
Second.
Motion on the floor duly seconded. Any discussion from any of the council members? Councilmember Polke,
It looks like McBride's raised his hand.
Councilmember McBride,
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm in support of this idea for expediting things. However, one of the concerns that I've had is I know we have an ordinance and guidelines that lays out how the city informs the public in advance, by putting things in the paper and posting things in the neighborhood around where something's going to happen. I would request that the city look at enhancing that a little bit more so that there's more robust and diverse ways to inform the public of things. And I'm just speaking from example. A lot of times the public will, not everyone sees the sign, nearby where something's going to happen, or not everyone subscribes to the Post and Courier or whatever. Because I've, in my 2 years, I found that informing the public, when the public doesn't feel like they're being informed or being given advance notice of things, that's when the resentment builds. And then secondly, that's where we come in as council members. I know these boards are independent of the city council members, but the more I'm informed of things that are happening in my district proactively by the city staff, the better I can articulate to the public proactively and inform them myself. And that again, in just the 2 years that I've been here, I find that helps alleviate a lot of concerns and fill in a lot of unknown gaps and of knowledge, which again leads to confusion and resentment. So that's just I'm supportive of this. I'm just adding kind of a corollary consideration that I'm asking the city to consider in beefing up our notification parameters and requirements, as well as proactively reaching out more to the city council members so we can understand things happening in our district so we can proactively communicate with the public. That's it. Thanks.
any further comments or questions from people other than myself? I got to say something about this, so I want to let everybody else have their opportunity.
I support.
Okay, yeah, the mayor's on board. But I think there's some themes here that we can, draw from the discussion we just had about 3,500. I mean, the development review process, especially a process that involves these quasi-judicial boards like the DRB, like the BAR, like the BZA, when a project has to go before that, it inserts risk into the equation. If at one of these meetings, for whatever reason, a project that has been in the works for a year or longer at great expense has the potential to be derailed, has the potential to be sent back with comments that require significant re-engineering, redoing expensive architectural work. Not only does that add to the cost of these projects. It incurs delays. I mean, we're talking about fire stations. We're talking about, critical stormwater infrastructure, things of that nature. And so what we're talking about doing here is not abandoning the concept of design review. We're not abandoning the idea that we want things to look nice in the city of Charleston. It's just changing how we do it. Design review can happen in other ways other than going in front of a board with a bunch of, very well-meaning appointed people at a public meeting to sort of hash things out on the fly. We have professionals that are hired by the city of Charleston. We have excellent consultants. Design review can happen administratively, and I think that that's what this is doing. It's pushing this more into that direction. So I think this is a great step. I'd like us to keep this conversation going with the hopes of potentially expanding this so that we perhaps give this same treatment to affordable and workforce housing that would otherwise be subject to DRB review around the city. I think we should talk about similar measures for BAR review on the peninsula. That was actually one of the questions I had about Project 3500 as to whether and to what extent BAR involvement is allowed there. But we just have to be a lot more mindful of these things in our procedures and what the unintended consequences of them can be, because they can have real costs in terms of delaying, derailing, complicating projects that we need to deliver for the public good, whether it be, critical capital projects, fire stations, things of that nature, or also affordable workforce housing, things of that nature as well. Because oftentimes, and I'll just be honest, I mean, I see this happen around the state. An affordable workforce housing project will have to come before the DRB, and you have people that don't want these projects to happen because of various prejudices and various reasons, and they flood and pack these meetings to derail these projects for pretextual purposes, and they get hung up in litigation, and it creates enormous problems. I've seen it firsthand. It happens all the time. So eliminating these friction points, reducing risk, allows us to deliver these much needed projects for our constituents, which is what this is all about. So that's a long-winded way of saying I'm going to support this, and I think it's a great effort that we're all undertaking. So
We do verbatim minutes here,
yeah, we should let's revisit that. I know we had a big talk about that a couple of years ago. Now with AI and whatnot, we don't need to be doing that anymore.
Mr. Chairman, I know you were striving for the last word on that, but I have a question.
Oh, please. No.
Thank you.
Go for it.
Are we solving for a challenge that the city had encountered with city-driven capital projects being held up in DRB?
Not particularly. I mean, at least not to my knowledge. I mean, we just, the last project that we went through DRB was 2 nights ago, and it was approved. So this is more just, it's been an issue, I think, in the past. I know on Fire Station 20, it was a real problem, which is maybe 1.5 years behind schedule. So again, I echo the chairman's point that this is really just to help expedite so that, these life safety issues and amenities, honestly, for our constituents aren't held up. But again, doesn't eliminate public review process.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, yeah, it's a part of our continuing process improvement program that, we've been underway since the mayor came into office, is just taking a look at all of our processes and finding out where there are places where we can make improvements. And again, this is one because capital projects, again, they go through such an extensive vetting process by the city already to get on that capital improvements list. There's a significant integration, and we're working to always improve that as well between the capital projects team and the folks in my office in planning, so that we have that collaboration and that connection going into development of these projects, that we felt that this was a good place where we can protect the public interest in that, but also protect the timing and just get those projects going out faster.
Yeah, and just workload of staff, I think, is a huge part of this.
And so just to boil it down, so it's still going to have conceptual review at the DRB.
Yes,
It's just final review is now done at a staff level.
preliminary and final, because
Preliminary and
again,
final.
these design reviews have a three-stage process: conceptual, preliminary, and then final review. Many final reviews are already done at staff, but this would put preliminary and final firmly in staff.
Got it. And so conceptual, does the DRB typically vote conceptual approval through, or is that more of like just a listening feedback session?
Conception, again, it depends on the preparedness of the application, like the mayor mentioned. The city's team with our consultant presented the Johns Island Rec Center to DRB just this past Monday. First conceptual review, got approved, no problem, no additional conditions. If a development team is prepared, very much can get that approved on first takeaway. If sometimes they're not as prepared and the site plan is not living up to what our expectations are, then they may get comments that require them to come back. Most of the time, though, it's approved with conditions, and they make those changes before they come back for what we call preliminary.
But you know, with a city capital project, just by virtue of it being a city capital project and it having, you know, so many hands on it internally, that those aren't going to be the half-baked projects that go to the DRB. So they're going to be much more eligible for a very warm reception at conceptual review versus, you know, a shopping center developer from Atlanta that may not know how we roll down here.
That's always our expectation. And then, as I said, since the mayors came on board, there's been a lot more hands-on, taking a look at not just the functionality, but also the design and how these buildings complement where they're going to be and just complement the civic nature of these buildings. And so absolutely, again, we feel like this is an efficient improvement to the process for these, given all those factors we've discussed.
And so it's not eliminating DRB review, it's just streamlining it. And essentially this conceptual review is that it's akin to there being a public charrette for the public to participate in, voice general opinions about design and things of that nature, but not getting into maybe, you know, the fine points that get, you know, more addressed the further you go in the design review process.
Absolutely.
Okay. Sounds good. Yes, ma'am.
Because we did continue to make some revisions to the ordinance. What should be in your packet is a slightly updated version from this, where the design would go to DRB for conceptual presentation. The board could provide comments and guidance, but a vote would not be required. So that is a more current version that should, I think, be in your packets. If not, we'll make sure that it is.
I like that even better. That's fantastic. All right. We need to vote on this. Okay. All in favor of recommending out the DRB review amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Great work, everybody, on that. And next up is none other than our new zoning district, MU3WH, an overview and update from the hardest working man in local government, I believe. Josh, you were coming forward, I thought.
Well, I'm doing it? Yeah, you're doing it.
Okay. Josh, take it away.
Mr. Chairman, as he's coming forward, is this an update with also a vote attached to it or just?
Yeah, I think the idea is for us to do exactly what we just did for the DRB
Okay.
Amendment, recommendation out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So just to kind of step back a little bit, and the mayor talked about this earlier, we had the kind of the guiding principles of redevelopment from Project 3500, and there were a lot of different elements of this: no displacement, community input through resident review, public-private partnerships. And as part of that, we did an entitlement. And the entitlements kind of have two different sides of this. One is, again, going back to the eliminating risk and making this something that doesn't get, trapped in, bureaucratic purgatory type thing, is that we wanted to have sites that were pre-entitled for people that were willing to join with us in Project 3500. And so we talked about doing a new zoning district that would reflect kind of the modern day MU workforce housing. I'm going to get back to that because this is now in its 20th year of existence, the mixed use workforce housing. First one was in 2006. And so this is also reflective of the 100-year housing, and then looking at multiple financing sources. When we look at these financing sources are attracted to things that have no risk. So when these people bid on this, the capital stack, they bring the social impact fund, they bring the pension fund from California, teachers union, and it's all at the table as they're bidding. They're not taking a $4 million risk into getting into this. So this is all part of that process. So we, just to give you a little background, this is not a new concept. This is the third version of the mixed use workforce housing district. The first one was approved in 2006 to facilitate projects that could go beyond a certain density limitation in the downtown district. That was one of the big issues at that time. 2019 version dealt with the artist known as fee in lieu and how we were going to calculate fee in lieu per square foot, which that story didn't end well. And then also, so now we're back to 2026 with a new version of that to promote, again, with the goal of promote mixture of housing opportunities in a mixed use redevelopment. One of the things that's interesting is that in the Bloomberg report, we had a lot of comments about the burn off of what's happening in the burn off. So in this 20th year, those units in 2006 that were workforce housing units are now coming back into market because there was a 20-year burn off. And that was, we were actually a leader in that time in the state when we were doing that, going through for having those limits. But now we're at a different point of a crisis that we need to have something that's different than just a 20-year differential. So,
gosh, I think in the early, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think in the early days of MU1, we actually had some projects that were 10-year burn-offs, right?
yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
and it was a no-brainer. Boom, they were.
20 was set for,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right.
So,
that's right. And so, thank you for that correction. And then, so the project 3500, we have 3,500 new affordable units, and we need an implementation tool from a zoning standpoint. So this is the tool. So we've got financing tools, we've got zoning tools, we've got design tools, we have entitlement tools. And so this is just part of that overall package. What we're doing is important to note. So I created a 2-page white paper. So if you don't want to read the 109-page version, you can look at the 2-page version of this ordinance, and you can see kind of all the different tools. Please note that we're working within the existing framework of mixed-use workforce housing districts, and we're making amendments to that district itself. We're not creating a whole new district, but we're, in terms of an ordinance, we're creating an amendment to what's already on the books. So out of 3,500, we have this idea of both how the distribution, 50% is market, 50% affordable. So we've had more breakdown in terms of the AMI coming from recommendations from Bloomberg, how we should have these AMIs coming into market. And then the big one is that we're going in perpetuity for affordability through deed restriction. That's for sale and for rent perpetuity. Important to note that we don't have inclusionary zoning in South Carolina. And so what we have to do is we can't not do a city-led rezoning effort on properties to do rezone this to MU3 without the owner's consent. So we have to have consent as opposed to other zoning that we do rezonings. Because it involves inclusionary housing, we have to have the owner's consent. So that is a perpetuity forever. Fee in lieu, we are not allowing fee in lieu in MU3 as proposed. And this is a very simple thing. The private sector can build affordable and workforce housing 30 times faster than the public sector. And so what happens is these fees in lieu sit in bank accounts and then they're not being absorbed. And what we need really is on the ground movement of delivery of housing. And the fastest way to do that is not with a fee in lieu. So that's a big part of this ordinance as well. And so then we have adjusted site regulations. These are all basically the same as in the other previous mixed use workforce housing districts. So no setbacks. We have no residential density limit. Now there's a caveat to that because you have to park it and you have to stay within your height district, right? So it's really not a no residential density limit, but we allow you to get above the GB and the other different zoning limitations. Reduced parking requirements and revised tree protection standards. We use the same tree protection standard that we did in the MUSC Medical District overlay. And the reason for that is a lot of these sites that we're looking at are campus-like sites. When you look at the Housing Authority, these are not lot by lot. These are large sites that need those flexibilities of being able to do campus-wide adjustments. The adoption schedule that we're looking at is today we're taking the Planning Commission with unanimous approval in January. We brought it here before going to City Council, and this is on the agenda for March 24th and April 14th respectively. And then once we do that, we would also look to be rezoning targeted sites. Remember those sites that are delivering the big punch from Project 3500 to have them be part of this initiative. I will say something too for the preservation groups. We are not changing height districts as part of this rezoning. That's very important. So through the charrette, we will be able to contextualize height based upon the different building types that we're coming forward with. And the reason for that is a lot of these housing authority properties are adjacent to very delicate fabrics of community that Vanjie Ransford would come after me and have her way with not being able to do these certain types of things. So again, one of the things that's really interesting in this design concept, what we're trying to do, unlike I think what other cities are doing, we've just had a call about this with design initiative, is that we're trying to create density that's restrained. And that's very important. So we're trying to create State Street at 89 dwelling units per acre. And we're not trying to create the donut, the Texas donut. That's in the second ring suburb of Houston, right? So that's a very difficult thing to do. It's actually probably the highest level of difficulty of designing density that looks like Chalmers Street and not Sacramento, right? And so that's something that we really want to do. And so we're trying to get this really restrained height and having those different typologies that come about that are absolutely beautiful and of that human scale that's of Charleston, as the mayor says. So that's the podcast of MU3WH.
Okay, Mr. Chairman,
Councilman
I've
Seegings.
got to transform myself from human to Zoomer in a second, so I'd like to ask a question before I go, if you don't mind. So it's great. By the way, I choose Chalmers Street, not Sacramento, so thank you. That's much better. Other than the properties we've talked about earlier today for Project 3500 and other government-owned or government co-owned properties, do you envision the private sector embracing this, or this zoning to be aimed at government-owned properties?
The initial is to basically kickstart Project 3500 to get this going into a place where we are pre-entitling, we're pre-zoning, we're doing all these things. I can't speak to that, quite frankly, to see how they would do that. But I think that it could be well received in certain instances that where if you look in the back of the capital stack in some of these social impact funds, these social impact funds are requiring all of this already. So there actually would be a benefit for some of that to happen.
It seems to me there might be some opportunity on some bigger parcels for some split zoning. I mean, some of it's MU2, some of it's MU3, you put it inside a PUD. I mean, I think it just is another tool out there. And as you said, I mean, some of these capital funds are requiring it. I think it's gonna be harder to get someone to take a huge parcel and just throw this on there with an in perpetuity requirement and limitation. But if it can be coupled with other zoning tools that we've got to make a bigger, more successful project, I think that's really where outside of the government side, we can see some opportunity.
We have the TIF funding too,
right?
That can happen with affordable housing. And the way that that's written is that can be public or private. It's not a private, it's not a publicly owned asset.
But the TIF, and I'm going to leave after this, but that went back to my who owns the dirt question. The TIF funding comes from who owns the dirt, the private sector, right? I mean, when the public sector only owns the dirt, you don't fund the TIF. So we got to be really conscious, I think, about how we entitle things and how we see the ownership when we're partnering with the private sector.
So I'll give you a great example. We had a private developer come in the other day with a proposal that would be incorporating private dirt, TIF funding, and meet all the requirements of MU3.
I mean, that would be a home run, right? That'd be sort of your dream person, but.
And to note that we did have these are minimum requirements. It doesn't mean you can't do 100%,
right?
60. or 100% 30. And then one of the things that we also want to consider is an amendment to this ordinance that came from a comment about the Charleston Housing Authority to kind of codify their involvement in the RAD program for when we do this repurposing of the things. And so what we've added is in the special conditions of MU3, we've acknowledged the language of Section 18 of the HUD program that acknowledges the RAD program as well as the 30% AMI to codify that in the ordinance so that people will see that and understand that if they're in a 30% situation today, there is a 30% situation of tomorrow.
Thank you, Josh.
It was great. I think, and like what we did with the DRB, I would make a motion that this committee recommend approval to city council of this zoning.
Second.
You got a motion properly seconded. Any further discussion on MU3, Councilmember Polkett?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I, had already prior to the meeting made respectful representations to the mayor and chairman about my inability to support a recommendation at this particular time. And it's really at this particular time a procedural concern. I have listened here on my 23rd day on council with quite deep interest as to what's being presented, and we got a lot going on in this special meeting right now. Certainly value and appreciate the hard work that's been put into it, the focus on Charleston oriented and specific design, the fact that the zoning classification offers perpetual covenants that makes it superior to previous efforts, and also the fact that we are, moving beyond the fee and lieu structure, all very good signs. The challenge that I have here is really making sure that I am in a position to articulate with certainty back into District 4, an area that's very much affected by the future plans that we're articulating here. Also in a position to answer questions and fully process a lot of the nuances. And where we stand now, when the newspaper article came out on the 20th, the day before this was presented to the Planning Commission, that newspaper article articulated the specific income brackets that are contemplated by way of AMI in the ordinance, going down to the 60 and below. And that caused a lot of folks to reach out to me because they didn't see themselves in those income brackets and they didn't see people that they cared about in those income brackets. And when you are trying to work folks through the sensitivities of that matter and the history of their experience with these deliberations, it's hard to suggest that they go out on faith or that they understand this complexity or that requirement, and really requires some real talk and some time. I think that between January 20th or 21st, when this was recommended by the Planning Commission, this special meeting being called, the agenda being circulated last Sunday, a great conversation I was able to have with the chairman and Mr. Martin on Tuesday that very gratefully led to that language that I very much appreciate, that acknowledges, as you saw, the involvement of RAD and the inclusion of the AMI no greater than 30%, which was an opportunity for the people who currently reside in public housing to see themselves in this zoning classification, which was a concern of mine. I'm still receiving questions about folks between 30 and 59, although that's no greater than 60. There's some questions to be put there. And there's also some questions with respect to the range of the public housing involvement, where we are with the 30% piece there. I thought it was interesting in this conversation that the asset management capabilities of the housing authority would find their way to the future of this project. And so that's another thing that I'll have to clarify my understanding of asset management versus the HUD evolution towards project-based Section 8 vouchers for these purposes. So that's a new question that I have coming out of this. One thing that I do want to make clear, though, is I do honor and appreciate and respect the sense of urgency and the hard work. I do believe that oftentimes as been said in this meeting, I concur that oftentimes when we take too long, time is money. And I don't believe that dilatory tactics should be used as a proxy for opposition. I do see a lot of value in the broad strokes of this. But at this particular time, this being my first community development meeting in the context of a special meeting, where a lot of stuff is being presented, and there's an opportunity for evolution of this as it finds its way before council, that it would be real responsible for the way that I govern myself with the level of consideration that I require in order to make an informed decision, for me to vote to recommend an item that I believe there has not been enough time allotted for full consideration as well as for community consultation. So as it stands now, I'm not going to move to defer out of respect for the values and the intent as I understand it and as a sort of an extension of trust. But personally, since I only control my vote and that as representative of District 4, I will personally vote no at this particular time, with the hope that we spend all the time between now and this consideration before council fully vetting this proposal, providing the community a chance to understand and comment. And at some point, perhaps that will be a no for now, and that can find its way not only to a yes, but to a yes with the spirit of advocacy and support.
Understood. Thank you for those comments and appreciate the dialogue and discussion and hope to continue that and work through this together. Any?
I as well am going to go no, and I don't see any issue with me being a yes at a regularly called committee meeting. There you go.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Jim, you got anything?
No, I mean, since a motion has not been made to defer, I guess we'll just go forward.
Got it. Yeah, and just briefly, I would just say in response to some of these concerns, which are very valid, given the history of prior redevelopment efforts around the country and even on the city of Charleston Peninsula, these concerns are well founded that you have, and we want to make sure that we go about this in a way that's clear and transparent and ultimately reassuring to the community that we're all in this together and working to make sure everyone's concerns are addressed. The one point I would make is zoning is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle when you start talking about how these deals happen and how they get off the ground. Zoning is just sort of a foundational framework, but the real rubber is going to meet the road and we talked about this earlier, when the actual deals start getting penciled and designed and negotiated and papered as part of actually bringing a project out of the ground. And that's where these details are really going to get locked in. And as with the Housing Authority being a partner in many of these ventures, they'll have a seat at the table to ensure that their constituencies are properly accounted for and that they are abiding by the various federal programs that have the specific AMI thresholds and things of that nature that you were referencing. So this goes much further beyond zoning. Zoning is very important. It's the framework, it's the starting point, but zoning is not ultimately prescriptive in terms of how all of these developments are going to happen, because as we talked about, this MU3WH, one of the benefits of it is it's flexible enough to accommodate a housing authority partnership project as well as an entirely private deal as well. And so, but those developments are not going to be the same. They're not going to even be close to the same. They'll be different because the deals will be structured differently, just given who's involved in those particular project. So very good conversation to be having. Most local governments are not talking about adopting zoning that supports affordable housing. It's almost always the opposite. And so again, this is very unique what we're doing here today, spending a couple hours together at a city hall talking about how to promote affordable housing. Normally, these are special called meetings where people are outside with, pitches and, torches trying to kill affordable housing deals, and local government elected officials being put under pressure to adopt moratoria, change zoning, kill projects. Nothing could be further from the truth. And I think today's community development meeting is a clear testament to that. Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Polk, I appreciate and respect where you're coming from, and appreciate the conversations beforehand. And absolutely, it is a lot to take in. We are doing a lot right now. It is complicated. It is nuanced. It is evolving, right? But as you and I discussed, there is an urgency to this. There is a need, a growing need to address this. And while I think that it is absolutely critical to make sure everything is flushed out in the public, and particularly with the existing residents of the housing authority properties, that's why we're doing scheduled a number of listening sessions with residents so that they can be educated on what we're talking about, not just from the zoning, but with Project 3500, and make sure that their voices are heard and that they feel confident that they're not going to be displaced, because as we've said repeatedly, that a critical component of this is to make sure that existing residents within the housing authority properties are not to be displaced. But I'll just wrap up and say this is moving. This is moving quick. And I would say to the public, I would say to the advocacy groups, and I would say to council that now is the time to roll up your sleeves and focus on this. This is going to need to be a group effort. This is going to only work if we all kind of come together on this. And I totally respect how complicated it is, but in order to address this, and we have got countless studies that demonstrate the absolute essential need and growing need that we tackle this head on. So my urge to all those that need to be involved is to focus on it, to read the details, to make your voices heard, to make it better, right? And where we are right now is asking this to go to City Council. There will be multiple listening sessions between now and third reading on this. No properties will actually be zoned this until such time as we have a lot more clarity on the actual deal points in Project 3500. So this is the very beginning step. And while again, I appreciate the reservations and completely respect where you're coming from, I would say that, what I want to make sure we're not sending a message to the community that right out of the gate we're faltering on this, or we're getting too bogged down in nuances that aren't going to be allowed to be flushed out by community effort. So again, I respect where you're coming from. I would just urge that we move forward on this and do recommend approval to council, and use that time in between to make sure, as you pointed out, that everybody can get up to speed on the work that's been done over the past year, and feel not just comfortable with it, but can become real vocal advocates for it. So thank you.
Councilmember McBride has his hands up.
Councilmember McBride.
Yeah, just sorry, one quick follow-up question. And I think that the language of this is, it's an improvement over the current zoning. It has more kind of guarantees that certain types of housing will be built. So I think I'm in support of it. I just wanted to ask, which council meeting will this come to? Is it this following Tuesday or after that? Do we know which one it'll go to?
Yeah. Second reading is going to be, I think, mid-March, and then final reading, third reading would be in April.
But
So
we're
first
going to get
reading.
first reading next week.
No, according to the white paper, first reading would be on March 24th, And the second reading would be on April 14th.
Nice. We got
Got it.
plenty of time. We got
Yeah, that's
plenty
what I wanted to bring up. I just sort of knows how much time we have to discuss this between now and then. That's good. Thanks.
Absolutely. And maybe one thing that would help is like maybe putting together a hypothetical deal to just show maybe how all these things work together. Because I mean, listen, sometimes I take for granted. I mean, I deal with zoning stuff every single day, but like normal people don't, and average people in the community don't, and they shouldn't. So I think having something that we can point to that very clearly illustrates how all these different moving pieces fit together, I think would benefit really everybody in the city. And I think it would just be because I agree with the mayor. I mean, this is something from my perspective that everybody in the community should get excited about. This is unprecedented. It's a very positive, bold initiative to tackle an enormous problem. The status quo is totally insufficient to meeting the challenge. Like where we currently stand right now is we are on a freight train going off a cliff towards unaffordability, continued gentrification, and all these negative issues around housing and whatnot. We have to do something. This is something in a very big way. And we got that's something to be excited about. Now, is it perfect? Probably not. Nothing is, but it's bold. And I think we need to understand it better. We need to put more eyes on it. We need to keep talking about it. And together as a community work for, bringing this forward in the best manner it can be, because without it, we're doomed. I mean, we really are around issues like affordability and things of that nature. I mean, we are on a freight train towards not having much affordable housing in the city. And we got to make that, we got to correct that. Josh.
So just to make a comment about the public outreach and the deal and the design and the zoning and those types of things. That's exactly what we'll be doing from March 16th to March 20th at 108 Meeting Street. It's completely open to the public. You can come in anytime, meet with the team, have questions answered, and go through. We're going to actually show the deal. We're going to show the zoning. We're going to show the design. We're going to show Project 3500, how we implement that. And we'll be designing 7,000 homes in 5 days. So.
And we're going to be questioning those answers too.
Good stuff. Well, believe it or not, we actually have some more stuff we got to get to.
We have a motion on the floor that we need to vote on.
Oh, we got a motion. We got to vote this out. Okay, so all in favor of voting out the MU3WH zoning district, please signify support by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. Do we need to do a roll call, or do you think you got it? Okay, cool. That sounds good. I think the motion passes, but obviously, like we just talked about, much more work to do before this becomes final. Last item on our agenda today is authorization to pursue the acquisition of 74 and 76 Stewart Street by all means necessary, up to and including condemnation, for the purpose of constructing affordable housing in conjunction with Project 3500. Ms. Copeland.
Ms. Copeland, if you let me just give a quick background on this. These are two parcels that are on Stewart Street that back up to the property that we are under contract for with the longshoremen. And one of them has been the site of repeated police calls with a lot of drug activity going on. I think it's abandoned or vacant. Maybe I should just let you talk. I'll shut up then. Never mind.
So 76 Stewart has come before this body before, based on the high level of just police activity there. But now, in light of our planned purchase for 899 Morrison, we would like to pursue the purchase of 76 and 74, which is immediately adjacent to this 899 Morrison, for the purpose of incorporating it into the affordable housing project and plan. So we would ask that you bless this and send it to council for the acquisition for the purpose of using it as affordable housing.
Can you speak to the current condition of the properties? Yes.
74 is owned by an LLC. It's currently boarded and not occupied. 76, we believe might be heirs property. It's in the name of one Julia Robinson, who we cannot locate, and we do not know who the people are that are living in it.
Move for approval.
We've got a motion on the floor to approve. Can I entertain a second?
Second.
All right. Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion?
I just have a procedural question. Just to make sure I understand, this is brought before community development versus real estate. I just want to know what's the distinction for these sorts of actions in that regard.
My suspicion is this has an affordable housing nexus.
It's tied to this project 3500, so I
Okay.
thought it would be best to put it in CD since you were already talking about that project. The last time we've taken these generally is through public safety, just depends on the topic.
Okay. Got it.
But ultimately, this will have to come before full council for
Correct.
approval. And will that be next Tuesday? Or?
No, it'll be at the next schedule. I think it's the second meeting in February
Got it.
when this is reported out.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay. Any other comments or questions from the committee? All right, let's vote. All in favor, please signify support by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Want to thank everybody for being here and participating so actively today. If you're into this kind of stuff, if you're into zoning, if you're into affordable housing, this is like must-see TV on YouTube for those 13 people out there. But I mean, it really shouldn't go unrecognized just how rare it is to see local governments actually do this. This does not happen often, certainly in this state. So kudos to everybody. Thank y'all.